If a husband slaps his wife, it's wrong. It's not allowed, right? If a teacher slaps their student, it's wrong. It's not allowed, right? If a caregiver slaps an elderly person, it's wrong. It's not allowed, right? If a parent slaps their child, it's wrong, but it's allowed, right? I'm Italian, and this is all based on my experiences growing up in Rome. If you don't see this reality in the country you grew up in, well then good for you. This can be your chance to learn about some questionable societal norms in Italy. Now, if you don't agree with what I've said at the beginning, imagine this scenario. You're walking down the sidewalk, and on the other side of the street, you see a couple arguing. At one point, the woman raises her voice for how angry she gets, and the man slaps her on the face. Once you witness this, what do? You go to the woman, make sure she's safe, she's okay, and maybe even call the authorities, right? Now let's imagine a different scenario. You're walking down the sidewalk, and on the other side of the street, you see a mother walking with her child. At one point, the kid misbehaves, the mother gets angry, she loses her patience, and slaps him. Once you witness this, what do? Nothing. You keep on walking down the sidewalk. You won't do anything about it because it's okay. Somehow, parents hitting their children, it's normal. Growing up in Italy, I was used to seeing these episodes of violence from parents to children. Yet, I never realized how wrong it is until I was able to gain a different perspective on it. This happened when I moved out of Rome and started studying in an international school. I still remember that day. I was in my history class, and we had to assess how wrong various things are. And one of the few that came up was parents hitting their children. All of my friends, who were mostly Americans and Canadians, picked the answer very wrong. Now that surprised me, as I chose the answer, it depends, which surprised them. To justify what for me was a normal answer, I said that of course, aggravated and repetitive beatings are very wrong, but that once or twice, it's understandable, and it might be necessary to educate a child. My friend's reaction was not what I expected. I can't even describe the expression on their faces. For the first time in my life, I realized that something so normal for me, it's actually not. This opened my mind and eyes to critical thinking, which is what brought me here today. Now I encourage you to see what this experience demonstrates. We might grow up in certain environments and scenarios that convince us that some things are completely normal, but it is imperative that we zoom out of our little bubble and assess issues such as this one with a sense of morality and objectivity that we're all gifted with. Thinking back to that day, it almost scares me to realize how the society I grew up in somehow brainwashed me, convinced me to think that parents using violence on their children was an ordinary and justifiable act. By normalizing violence, we're telling the same kids that if they use violence, it's okay, that there will be no consequences, that it's accepted and it's allowed. And most likely, they will use the same violence on their children as well. We're then perpetuating a cycle that has been going on and will go on from one generation to the other, where violence is used as a solution to things, when in reality it is the cause of most of our problems. As a matter of fact, in Italy's violence and crime rates are among the highest in Europe. Unlike many might think, a slap or a spank is not a one-second action, but rather an endless one, as it doesn't impact the child only the moment they receive it, but for the rest of their life. In fact, according to the National Institute of Justice, a child who's exposed to violence from a very young age is most likely to abuse drug or alcohol suffer from depression or other mental health disorders, act aggressively and engage in criminal behavior once adult. Even though the Article 572 of the Italian criminal law says that any person who uses violence against a member of their family is punished with imprisonment, and that this imprisonment is increased if the offense is committed against a person who is younger than 14 years old, 80% of Italy's family still use minor violence as a form of punishment towards their children, according to a study from the University of Pisa. Now, when I think of punishment, I think of something that is supposed to make the child understand why what they did was wrong and make them pay the consequences for their mistake. So how are we telling children that what they did was wrong by using violence? By scaring them? By making them fearful to act in certain ways? Hasn't history shown us that nothing good ever comes out by imposing fear and terror on people? Meaning that there won't ever be a positive outcome coming out the use of violence on children. Also, how are we telling children that what they're doing is wrong by doing something wrong? Rather hypocritical, don't you think? Now, many might say that the scenario I made up at the beginning is rather superficial, because unlike the woman arguing with her partner, children have to be educated, and at times, minor violence, may be the only solution to make them understand their lesson. This is a phrase that I've been hearing since I was a child, but I refuse to believe that the only and best way to make them children understand their lesson is by using violence. Maybe the truth is that there are better ways to educate kids, but we're so conservative of our old beloved fashioned ways that we attach onto them, without ever distancing ourselves from what was considered normal generations ago. Why are we so afraid of changing those things that we, to make ourselves feel better, call part of our culture? If you recall that day in my history class, I did claim that at times, violence might be the only solution for parents. Now I know this might sound a bit extreme, but I know why I said that. When I was 6 years old, my little brother was born, and even though I was a child as well, I was very aware and present at every stage of his growth. This is to say that I know how hard and tiring and exhausting it is to raise a child, and that at times everyone might lose their patience and might make a mistake that they're not proud of. But when I was a kid, I thought that in situations of chaos and when things get out of hand, violence was the only effective solution. And I know that many other Italian parents think so as well, even though they might not like it. And so I'm here to introduce to you to what for me is the best way to educate a child that doesn't include the use of violence. With my experience with my little brother, I realized that the only time the children actually understand that what they're doing is wrong, it's when you explain it to them. I know, it sounds really obvious, but seriously, just by the use of simple logic and reasoning, children can understand that what they're doing is wrong and that they shouldn't do it, and they will change the way they act without the need of using violence. What I'm doing today with this speech is a little example of this, as I am explaining to all those parents that might use minor violence on their children as a form of punishment, why it's purely wrong, and why it has enormous consequences on their kids, on their future, and on society as a whole. Overall, I encourage everyone listening to reconsider all societal norms. And by this I mean that we all have to rethink and revalue what we consider normal, because oftentimes it's not, or it shouldn't be. I hope you now understand that my main point is that just because something is done by everyone and it's always been this way, it doesn't mean it's right. And only by not being afraid of questioning and changing these societal norms can we as individuals and our society as a whole truly improve and develop. Now, I would ask you to do this for the greater good, to do it for your community, but I know it won't work. So I'll tell you this. Do it for you. Do it for your kids. Do it for your future. Thank you.